Have you ever heard that corporate loyalty is just a discount you give to your exploiter? I learned the hard way. When you spend 100% of your energy building the throne, the man on it demands your blood for free. But what happens when a terrible boss forgets I hold the system keys? If you have been bled dry for empty promises, listen closely. My perfect revenge was smiling while my enemy walked into his own grave. Hello to all the wonderful listeners of Boss Revenge Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently disabled our channel monetization, leaving us without an operating budget to continue producing content. If you find yourself enjoying today's story, please consider supporting us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon, where you can listen to exclusive, true, and even better revenge stories with massive runtimes. Those Patreon exclusives feature intricate situations that we simply cannot publish on YouTube, complete with multiple emotional voice actors bringing a single story to life. You can join us by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link located in the video description or the pinned comment. Now, let us dive right into today's story, where you will follow the journey of a woman named Ella Richardson. I am Ella Richardson, 32 years old, data systems architect, and for the last 6 brutal years, I have been the invisible backbone of Meridian SyncTech. We were a supposedly cutting-edge software solutions firm located in the heart of Chicago. Though anyone peeling back the curtain would see we were barely more than a facade. In the modern American corporate landscape, Meridian was less about groundbreaking software and entirely about the art of illusion. That illusion was meticulously crafted and maintained by our Chief Executive Officer, Marcus Vance. Marcus possessed the actual technical acumen of a rotting grapefruit, yet he wore his bespoke $5,000 suits like impenetrable armor and wielded empty corporate buzzwords like a lethal weapon. He was an absolute master at selling the grand dream while leaving someone else in the dark to build the grueling reality. Naturally, that someone else was me. The defining moment of his career, built on deception, arrived when Meridian somehow landed a massive multi-million-dollar contract with Vanguard Logistics. Vanguard was a billion-dollar transportation conglomerate, a titan in the industry, and they were desperate to modernize. Marcus had stood in their gleaming mahogany-paneled boardroom and sold them a complete fantasy. He looked the Vanguard executives dead in the eye and confidently pitched a proprietary supply chain prediction, artificial intelligence. He boasted, without a single shred of hesitation, that this magical system possessed the capability to automate exactly 80% of their entire global workflow. It sounded like pure magic to their ears. It sounded revolutionary. There was just one fatal flaw in his brilliant pitch. That artificial intelligence did absolutely not exist. Meridian did not own a proprietary algorithm, nor did we harbor any kind of revolutionary predictive engine in our servers. What we actually had was a chaotic patchwork of open-source software, desperately cobbled together like a sinking ship held intact by nothing more than digital duct tape and sheer unfiltered willpower, specifically, my willpower. While Marcus spent his evenings dining at high-end Chicago steakhouses, drinking aged whiskey and celebrating his brilliant deal-making skills, I spent my nights staring at a blinding screen until my eyes burned. I survived on stale coffee, zero sleep, and pure adrenaline. I was the only person in the entire company writing manual code patches, hour after grueling hour, just to keep the fragile system from completely imploding during our own internal testing phases. It was a terrifying digital house of cards. And I was the only one standing in the furious wind holding it up with my bare hands. You might logically think that being the sole savior of a company-defining deal would earn an employee a little recognition, or perhaps a substantial bonus. Not in this corporate wasteland, and certainly not under a man like Marcus Vance. His massive ego demanded absolute ownership of the triumph. In every single progress meeting, I watched in silent, boiling disgust as Marcus systematically erased my name from every presentation slide. He proudly paraded around the office as the sole mastermind and architect of the system. To ensure his fragile facade remained completely flawless, he issued a strict, non-negotiable mandate explicitly forbidding me from communicating directly with any member of the Vanguard team. "We need a unified voice moving forward, Ella," he would say, flashing that hollow practice smile of his. "I will handle all the client-facing strategy and negotiations. You just stay in the back and keep the code clean." I nodded politely, swallowing the rage that threatened to choke me. I knew the truth, and I knew the system was a ticking time bomb. His house of cards was inevitably destined to fall. But even I did not expect the wind to blow so fiercely and so soon. The turning point arrived entirely out of nowhere. Julian Sterling, the ruthless and incredibly powerful Chief Executive Officer of Vanguard Logistics, was clearly not a man who blindly trusted glossy presentation slides and smooth-talking salesmen, without any prior warning or polite requests. Julian sent a chillingly brief email directly to Marcus. Julian announced that he was personally flying into Chicago to witness a live stress test of the highly touted artificial intelligence system firsthand. He wanted to see our software handle a massive real-world data load in real time, and he stated firmly that he was arriving first thing next Monday morning. It was the one scenario Marcus had never anticipated. And the real panic was about to set in. The facade cracked wide open at exactly 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Marcus dragged me into his corner office, slamming the frosted glass door shut behind us with a trembling hand. All of his usual corporate swagger had completely evaporated into thin air. His skin was the color of curdled milk, and a visible sheen of cold sweat coated his forehead. Catching the dim afternoon light, he knew exactly what was coming. A live stress test meant Vanguard would dump massive amounts of raw, unfiltered logistical data into our servers. Without my constant, secret manual interventions running in the background, the servers would inevitably choke, stall, and die in a matter of seconds right in front of Julian Sterling. He paced the room like a trapped animal before finally spinning around to face me. "Cancel whatever plans you have this weekend," he ordered, his voice tight, breathless, and laced with absolute panic. "I need you here for the next 48 hours straight. We are going to build a mock script, a complete simulation." I stared at him, letting the sheer audacity of his words hang in the heavy air. He was not asking me to fix the system or find a legitimate workaround. He was demanding that I engineer a highly sophisticated, intricate digital illusion. He wanted a fake interface that would blindly swallow Vanguard's test data while simultaneously displaying pre-calculated, perfectly optimized results on the front-end screen. He wanted me to build a smoke and mirror show, making it appear as though the non-existent artificial intelligence was doing the heavy lifting effortlessly. "You are asking me to hard-code a fraudulent simulation to actively deceive a billion-dollar client," I said, keeping my tone completely flat and devoid of emotion. "Leaving aside the massive legal liabilities, which undoubtedly include potential federal wire fraud charges, a 48-hour emergency coding sprint requires formal authorization for overtime pay." Marcus stopped pacing immediately. The raw panic in his eyes instantly morphed into a toxic, sneering arrogance. He leaned over his mahogany desk, planting his palms flat on the wood. "Overtime pay," he scoffed, laughing a sharp, breathless laugh that echoed off the glass walls. "Ella, this is a test of your dedication to this company. You are going to do this for free as a privilege to keep your position on this team. Consider it mandatory volunteer work. If you do not have that script ready and running flawlessly by 8 o'clock Monday morning, you do not need to bother showing up ever again." For 6 long years, I had swallowed my pride. I had bitten my tongue while he stole my credit, sidelined my career, and relentlessly exploited my labor. But looking at his smug face, listening to him threaten my livelihood while demanding I commit corporate fraud for absolutely zero compensation, something deep inside my chest clicked into perfect, freezing clarity. I did not scream. I did not throw my coffee mug at his head or threaten to report him to human resources. I simply offered him a slow, deliberate nod. "I understand completely, Marcus," I replied softly. I turned around and walked out of his office. I went straight back to my cubicle and sat down at my keyboard, but I did not write a single line of his fraudulent simulation. Instead, I initiated a thorough, surgical digital extraction over the past year, just to keep Meridian from going totally under. I had written thousands of lines of foundational patch code. Crucially, I wrote them on my own personal laptop, during my weekends, strictly off the clock, according to the dangerously basic employment contract Meridian had me sign years ago. Any code written outside of company hours on personal hardware remained my exclusive intellectual property. I opened the main server directory and methodically highlighted every single proprietary patch I had ever created. With a few steady rhythmic keystrokes, I deleted my property entirely from the company infrastructure. I scrubbed the backup drives clean. I purged the emergency failsafes. I stripped away every protective layer I had ever built, leaving the Meridian system exactly as Marcus had originally designed it. It was now an empty, hollow shell, completely defenseless against the incoming storm. I then packed my personal belongings into a small cardboard box, walked out of the building, and spent my weekend sleeping an uninterrupted 8 hours a night. Monday morning arrived with a suffocating, heavy tension hanging over the office. At 8:15, the main glass conference room was packed to the brim. Julian Sterling sat calmly at the head of the long table, flanked by an intimidating wall of Vanguard executives in immaculate dark suits. Marcus stood at the front near the massive presentation screen, sweating profusely under his collar, but pasting on his signature fake smile. He was desperately waiting for my signal from the back room, fully believing I was hiding in the server closet, ready to run the fake script. He was catastrophically wrong. I pushed open the heavy glass door of the conference room and stepped inside. Every eye in the room shifted to me, including the sharp, calculating gaze of Julian Sterling. Marcus shot me a panicked, furious glare, silently demanding to know what I was doing out in the open during the most critical moment of his career. I ignored his silent rage and walked calmly right up to the front of the room. I reached around my neck, unclipped my plastic employee badge, and let it drop onto the center of Marcus's pristine presentation laptop. It landed with a sharp, echoing clack that silenced the entire room. I looked directly into his terrified eyes and offered him a bright, genuine smile. "The system is fully ready for you to run yourself," I said, my voice projecting clearly for every Vanguard executive to hear. "I do not work for free." Without waiting for a single response or lingering to watch the inevitable explosion, I turned my back on the stunned silence, walked straight out the door, and left Marcus Vance entirely alone to face the monster he had created. The biting chill of the Chicago morning air hit my face the second I pushed through the heavy glass lobby doors. It was a crisp, unforgiving cold, but it felt incredibly refreshing against my skin. I walked across the sprawling concrete parking lot, my footsteps echoing loudly in the quiet, empty space. I did not need to be inside that glass-walled conference room to know exactly what was unfolding on the second floor above me. From the pavement, I paused and glanced up at the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive suite. Even from this considerable distance, I could clearly see the gigantic projection screen glowing with a harsh, glaring red light. The system was violently crashing, spitting out thousands of fatal error codes every single second. Shadows of men in dark suits darted back and forth behind the tinted glass in a state of absolute chaos. I could easily envision Marcus standing at the head of the table, totally paralyzed, babbling incoherent excuses while his entire fraudulent empire crumbled into digital dust. The highly anticipated live demonstration had devolved into an absolute, unmitigated disaster within just 5 minutes of my departure. I reached deep into the pocket of my coat for my car keys, a profound sense of closure washing over my entire body. I was just about to pull the handle of my sedan when the distinct, sharp sound of leather dress shoes stepping onto the pavement broke the heavy silence of the parking lot. I turned around slowly. Stepping out from the imposing shadow of the corporate building was Julian Sterling. He was not rushing, nor did he look like a man whose massive company had just wasted countless hours on a spectacularly failed demonstration. His tailored charcoal overcoat fluttered slightly in the freezing wind. As he closed the distance between us, I noticed his expression. There was absolutely no anger or frustration in his sharp features. Instead, his dark eyes were unnervingly calm and razor-sharp, possessing the intense, calculating focus of a seasoned hunter who had finally cornered the elusive prey he had been tracking for months. "You certainly know how to make a dramatic exit, Miss Richardson," Julian said. His voice was a low, resonant baritone that easily cut through the howling winter wind. I stood my ground, gripping my keys tightly until the metal bit into my palm. I simply refused to let my hard work and personal intellectual property be leveraged to commit corporate fraud, I replied evenly, refusing to let my voice shake. Julian did not flinch or offer a corporate platitude. Instead, he reached inside the breast pocket of his coat and withdrew a sleek, matte black business card, extending it toward me. I took it carefully, noting the heavy weight of the premium cardstock and his direct personal contact number printed in embossed silver lettering. "Do you honestly believe I flew all the way from New York to Chicago just to watch a clown like Marcus Vance press a button?" Julian asked, a faint, knowing smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. My internal cybersecurity division ran a covert, deep-level diagnostic on Meridian's servers exactly 3 weeks ago. We already knew the primary predictive artificial intelligence was nothing more than a poorly disguised string of open-source garbage. I frowned, genuinely surprised by his blunt revelation. If you knew the software was a complete sham from the very beginning, why on earth did you agree to fly out for this live stress test? "Because my lead engineers also discovered something else," Julian continued, taking a slow, deliberate step closer. "They found a hidden architecture, a completely undocumented, brilliantly coded framework running deep in the background, desperately holding that open-source trash together. They called it the ghost in the machine. It was entirely anonymous, but its digital signature was unmistakable. Whoever wrote those complex patches was an absolute genius operating completely in the dark. I demanded this live demonstration because I wanted to see exactly what would happen when we put extreme pressure on the company. I wanted the ghost to reveal itself." He looked directly into my eyes, his gaze piercing and full of respect. And today, the ghost walked right out of the room. I let out a slow breath, the massive realization settling heavily on my shoulders. Julian Sterling had orchestrated this entire explosive scenario. He had played Marcus like a cheap fiddle, but before I could even process that fact, he delivered a revelation that completely altered the gravity of the entire situation. "We were never just negotiating a simple software licensing contract, Ella," Julian stated, his tone dropping an octave, becoming entirely businesslike and dangerously serious. "Vanguard Logistics is currently in the final stages of a corporate takeover. We are actively doing the paperwork to buy Meridian Sync Tech in its entirety. This morning was the ultimate due diligence trap. We needed to know if we were purchasing a functional technology firm or an empty shell managed by a con artist." The sheer scale of Marcus's delusions suddenly became crystal clear. He was not just trying to secure a massive client. He was trying to sell a completely worthless company for hundreds of millions of dollars, using my stolen, unpaid labor as the primary selling point to secure his own golden parachute. Julian crossed his arms over his chest, the wind whipping his coat around his legs. "I am going to offer you a position right here, right now," he said. "I want to hire you immediately as an independent architectural consultant directly for Vanguard Logistics. You will bypass human resources completely and report solely to me." "And what exactly would my first assignment be?" I asked, my heart beginning to hammer a heavy, steady rhythm against my ribs. "Your compensation will be exactly 5 times your current annual salary at Meridian," Julian answered, laying the financial cards on the table with ruthless efficiency. "In exchange, your mission is incredibly simple. I want you to officially and legally dissect every single line of code inside Meridian's servers. I want you to map out every broken process, every technical lie, and every piece of structural rot you have been forced to cover up over the last 6 years. You are going to hand Vanguard the exact technical ammunition we need to completely obliterate this acquisition deal and legally bury Marcus Vance." The freezing Chicago wind suddenly did not feel cold anymore. It felt like the perfect temperature for burning a corrupt empire to the ground. I looked down at the silver embossed card resting in my hand, feeling the ultimate power shift transferring directly into my grasp, then looked back up at the ruthless billionaire standing before me. "When do I start?" I asked, a slow smile finally breaking across my face. Within 24 hours of that freezing parking lot encounter, my entire professional existence transformed completely. I formally registered an independent consulting limited liability company and immediately signed an exclusive ironclad vendor contract with Vanguard Logistics. I traded my cramped, noisy cubicle at Meridian for a highly secure subterranean data vault deep inside Vanguard's Chicago headquarters. It was a silent, windowless room illuminated by the glow of 6 massive monitors. Completely isolated from the rest of the corporate hierarchy, I was granted unrestricted, top-tier administrative access to the entire data room containing Meridian SyncTech's due diligence files. Every single document, every line of source code, and every financial ledger Marcus had surrendered to Vanguard for the pending acquisition was now sitting right in front of me, waiting to be dissected. The autopsy of my former company began immediately, and it was a brutally efficient process. I knew exactly where all the bodies were buried, because I had spent the last 6 years tiptoeing around their shallow graves. Moving through their secure servers was like walking through a familiar, decaying haunted house. Finding the structural anomalies was effortless. I rapidly isolated 3 fatal cybersecurity vulnerabilities within their primary firewall. These were not minor glitches. They were massive, gaping holes that would allow any competent external hacker to walk right in and steal proprietary client data without triggering a single alarm. But the technological incompetence was just the tip of the iceberg. As I dug deeper into the administrative files, I cross-referenced the server capacity logs with the executive financial disclosures. The numbers simply did not match. Marcus had been aggressively cooking the books for months. He was artificially inflating the active user metrics by counting internal test bots as actual, paying logistics clients, padding the revenue projections by roughly 40%. However, the true killing blow, the undeniable piece of evidence that would guarantee his absolute destruction, lay in his aggressive cost-cutting measures. To maximize his profit margins and make the balance sheet look incredibly attractive before the buyout, Marcus had quietly downgraded our cloud storage compliance protocols. By doing so, he had directly violated numerous federal regulations governing the secure transmission of interstate logistics data. He was illegally storing highly sensitive shipping manifests, including transport routes for hazardous materials, on unsecured, cheap commercial-grade servers. It was a massive federal offense carrying catastrophic fines, and I compiled every single keystroke of proof into a pristine, encrypted dossier. While I was meticulously building this legal guillotine in the dark, Marcus remained completely blinded by his own towering arrogance. According to the internal corporate communications I was actively monitoring, he genuinely believed that Vanguard was merely hitting the pause button on the acquisition to negotiate a lower purchasing price. He arrogantly assumed the catastrophic system failure in the conference room was just a temporary setback, a slight technical hiccup that could easily be swept under the rug. In a state of frantic delusion, he immediately hired 24 cheap, inexperienced freelance programmers on short-term, low-paying contracts. He threw them into the server room, desperately ordering them to reverse engineer my deleted patches and rebuild the phantom code within a week. It was a hilarious, deeply pathetic exercise in futility. My architecture was a highly complex, interwoven lattice of custom predictive algorithms. Watching a group of underpaid strangers try to decipher the void I left behind was like watching toddlers attempt to defuse a nuclear warhead with a plastic hammer. They were hopelessly lost. The system remained completely paralyzed, and Marcus was burning through cash paying them. In the ruthless corporate world, blood in the water never goes unnoticed for long. The technology and logistics circles in Chicago were incredibly tight-knit, and vicious rumors began to spread like wildfire. Whispers echoed through the financial district that Vanguard had suddenly halted the Meridian acquisition and deployed a shadowy team of forensic auditors to scrutinize the source code. The market reacted exactly as one would expect. Corporate panic is highly contagious. Within a matter of days, 3 of Meridian's smaller secondary clients abruptly terminated their annual service contracts, explicitly citing vague concerns about system reliability and data safety. Marcus was rapidly bleeding capital, but he was so obsessively fixated on the impending Vanguard payday that he completely ignored the massive arterial spray happening right in his own backyard. With the damning evidence fully compiled, I prepared the final trap. Julian Sterling did not just want to cancel the deal. He wanted to ensure Vanguard was completely legally insulated from any potential blowback or breach of contract lawsuits from a desperate Marcus Vance. To achieve this impenetrable defense, I engineered a brand new, highly rigorous technical evaluation standard for Vanguard Logistics to implement on all future software acquisitions. On paper, it was a beautiful, entirely fair, and completely objective benchmark for modern corporate security. It demanded strict compliance with all federal logistics data laws, mandated a rigorous third-party penetration test of cloud storage security, and required a fully transparent audit of active user algorithms. In reality, it was a perfectly tailored, heat-seeking missile aimed directly at the darkest corners of Meridian SyncTech. Every single metric in that new standard was explicitly designed to highlight the exact crimes, lies, and technical failures I had just uncovered. There was absolutely no way Marcus could ever pass it, and he would have no idea that the impossible labyrinth he was about to walk into had been constructed entirely by the woman he had tried to force into unpaid slavery just 1 short week prior. The chessboard was set, the pieces were locked securely in place, and it was finally time to invite Marcus Vance into the slaughterhouse. The suffocating radio silence from Vanguard Logistics was systematically tearing Marcus apart. For 2 agonizing weeks, Julian Sterling did not return a single phone call, ignored every desperate email, and strictly instructed his executive assistants to stonewall any communication from Meridian SyncTech, trapped in an information vacuum and watching his company bleed dry. Marcus began thrashing blindly like a drowning man, in his frantic attempts to regain some semblance of control. He scoured the public corporate registries and discovered my newly formed consulting firm. His reaction was as predictable as it was pathetic. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, a heavy courier envelope was dropped onto my desk at Vanguard headquarters. It contained a highly aggressive, officially stamped cease and desist letter, drafted by some low-tier corporate attorney Marcus had likely hired on a steep discount. The document demanded I immediately shut down my operations. It boldly accused me of committing corporate espionage, stealing proprietary intellectual property, and blatantly violating a strict non-compete agreement. The sheer audacity of the threat made me laugh out loud in the empty, windowless data vault. Marcus was so accustomed to ruling through fear that he had completely forgotten the actual terms of my employment. The incredibly cheap, boilerplate contract he forced me to sign 6 years ago did not contain a single line regarding a non-compete clause. He had explicitly removed that section to avoid paying the standard industry retainer fees. Furthermore, the intellectual property he claimed I stole was the exact same open-source code he was currently passing off as his own. Instead of drafting a lengthy defense or letting the threat linger, I calmly walked upstairs and handed the document directly to the head of Vanguard Corporate Litigation. Vanguard retained a veritable army of ruthless, incredibly expensive lawyers who thrived on crushing frivolous threats. Less than 2 hours later, they responded on behalf of my consulting firm. They did not send a counter-lawsuit or a defensive essay. They sent a brutal, 2-line email directly to Marcus and his cheap attorney. Any further harassment of our independent consultant will result in immediate federal litigation. Please find attached the undeniable forensic evidence proving your unauthorized, illegal commercialization of strictly non-profit open-source architecture. Attached to the email was a highly detailed, 50-page technical breakdown exposing his exact theft, highlighting the specific licensing laws he was actively breaking every single day. The response from Marcus was absolute, terrified silence. He did not send another letter. He did not make another phone call. The legal threat was instantly vaporized, leaving him completely paralyzed. With his aggressive posturing neutralized, I returned my focus to the most critical phase of my investigation. I needed to find the exact bottom of his financial abyss. While dissecting the cross-referenced executive bank statements, I finally uncovered the darkest, most closely guarded secret Marcus possessed. I discovered exactly how he had managed to keep Meridian floating just long enough to secure the Vanguard meeting. He had not just taken out a standard business loan. Marcus was harboring a colossal, incredibly toxic bridge loan from a predatory, high-risk venture capital hedge fund to secure the massive influx of cash required to artificially inflate his operational scale. He had personally guaranteed the debt. He had mortgaged his sprawling luxury estate, leveraged his expensive sports cars, and liquidated his entire personal retirement portfolio to serve as collateral. He had literally bet his entire existence on one single hand of poker. He was absolutely convinced that the Vanguard buyout money would seamlessly cover the massive debt, clear his personal liabilities, and leave him with millions of dollars in pure profit. If the acquisition failed, Marcus would not just lose his company, he would lose his home, his assets, and face complete, insurmountable personal bankruptcy. I meticulously bound this devastating financial revelation together with the cybersecurity failures and the fake artificial intelligence documentation. I finalized the ultimate technical and financial audit report, transforming it into a lethal, undeniable weapon. On a rainy Thursday morning, Julian Sterling formally submitted my dossier to the Vanguard Logistics Board of Directors. The boardroom deliberation lasted less than 20 minutes. The heavy metaphorical stamp of absolute rejection was slammed down onto the table. The acquisition was officially dead. Vanguard was not going to buy a single share of Meridian SyncTech. However, Julian and I had agreed that simply walking away from the deal in silence was far too merciful for a man who demanded unpaid blood from his employees. We needed to bring him directly into the slaughterhouse. Late Friday afternoon, Julian personally picked up the phone and bypassed the stonewall, calling Marcus directly. He did not mention the failed audit, the catastrophic debt, or my involvement. Instead, his voice was smooth, commanding, and perfectly professional. Julian informed Marcus that Vanguard was prepared to hold one final, executive summit to determine the ultimate fate of the contract. He demanded that Marcus fly to the Vanguard headquarters on Monday morning, explicitly ordering him to bring every single piece of technical documentation, financial ledgers, and operational source code for a final comprehensive review. Sitting in his crumbling Chicago office, staring down the barrel of personal bankruptcy and a predatory loan, Marcus swallowed the bait entirely. He desperately believed this was his golden ticket. He thought he was being handed a miraculous second chance to charm his way out of the disaster and secure his millions of dollars. He had absolutely no idea that he was enthusiastically packing his bags to attend his own execution. Monday morning arrived with a blindingly clear sky over the city. At exactly 9 o'clock, the heavy glass doors of the executive boardroom on the top floor of Vanguard headquarters swung open. Marcus walked into the Tiger's Den exactly as I anticipated. He was wearing a brand-new bespoke suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase, and wearing a perfectly practiced, utterly fake smile of unshakable confidence. He strutted into the room, radiating an artificial aura of success, immediately launching into a rehearsed speech about a massive, upcoming updated version of the software that would magically fix all previous integration issues. He was completely ready to sell his grand illusion one last time. He made it exactly 3 steps into the room before his voice abruptly died in his throat. His confident stride faltered, and the arrogant smile melted off his face as if he had just seen a ghost. Sitting directly beside Chief Executive Officer Julian Sterling, occupying the most powerful seat at the long mahogany table, was me. Positioned perfectly in front of my neatly folded hands was a solid brass nameplate that caught the morning light. It read clearly, Ella Richardson, Director of Technology Assessment, Vanguard Logistics. I did not glare at him. I did not show a single ounce of anger or vindictiveness. I simply offered him the exact same polite, hollow smile he used to give me whenever he stole my credit. I pressed a small silver button on the console in front of me, and the massive projection screen at the end of the room illuminated. It displayed the title page of the final damage report I had spent the last several weeks meticulously crafting. "Good morning, Marcus," I said, my voice echoing calmly in the dead silence of the boardroom. "Please take a seat. We have a substantial amount of data to review." He collapsed into the nearest chair, looking as though all the air had been violently vacuumed from his lungs. I did not give him a single moment to recover. With slow, deliberate precision, I guided the entire room through every single slide of my forensic audit. I systematically dismantled his entire fraudulent empire piece by piece. I showed the Vanguard executives the exact strings of stolen open source code. I presented the manipulated financial ledgers that artificially inflated his user base by 40%. I projected the undeniable proof of his aggressive cost-cutting measures that directly violated federal logistics data laws. Marcus sat completely paralyzed. He was sweating profusely, his expensive suit clinging to his trembling frame. He tried to open his mouth to offer an excuse, perhaps to shift the blame to a nameless contractor, but Julian Sterling raised a single, authoritative hand, instantly silencing him. "We are fully aware that your technology is completely worthless, Marcus," Julian said, his voice dropping to a freezing, lethal register. "And as of this morning, Vanguard Logistics is officially and permanently terminating any and all acquisition negotiations regarding Meridian SyncTech. However, that is not the primary reason I asked you to fly here today." Julian leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, fixing Marcus with a stare that could cut through solid steel. "During our extensive due diligence process, spearheaded by Miss Richardson, we discovered the catastrophic bridge loan you took out from a high-risk venture capital hedge fund. We saw that you personally guaranteed that massive debt using your private estate and all of your personal assets as collateral." Marcus turned the color of freshly fallen snow. His eyes darted frantically between Julian and me, sheer terror radiating from his entire body. Julian delivered the final, devastating blow without a shred of mercy. "Vanguard Logistics does not just possess a technology division. We also operate a highly aggressive, multi-billion-dollar private equity investment arm. Late Friday afternoon, our investment division approached your hedge fund. We offered to purchase your toxic debt at a premium, and they happily agreed. We did not bring you here to buy your company, Marcus. We brought you here to inform you that Vanguard Logistics now legally owns your debt. We are your sole creditors. We hold the absolute legal right to demand immediate repayment in full." The realization hit Marcus like a runaway freight train. Vanguard was not just walking away. They were locking the doors and setting the building on fire. From an arrogant, overbearing boss who demanded unpaid blood just a few weeks ago, he was instantaneously reduced to a pathetic, broken shell of a man. Every drop of blood drained from his face. His hands shook violently as he looked across the table at me, his eyes wide with desperate pleading. "Ella, please," he stammered, his voice cracking pitifully. "You cannot do this. I will lose absolutely everything, my house, my savings, my entire life. Please, we worked together for 6 years. There has to be a way out of this. I am begging you. Give me a path out." I looked at the man who had exploited my brilliance, stolen my nights, and threatened to fire me for refusing to commit fraud for free. I felt absolutely nothing for him. No pity, no remorse. Just the profound, quiet satisfaction of a perfectly executed equation. I slowly reached out and closed my leather notebook, the soft thud echoing loudly in the silent room. I looked him dead in the eyes and delivered my final verdict. "You once told me that loyalty is free," I said, my voice as cold and sharp as cracked ice. "But bankruptcy comes with an invoice." I nodded to the corner of the room. 2 massive, stone-faced corporate security guards stepped forward, placed their hands firmly on his shoulders, and escorted Marcus Vance out of the boardroom, out of the building, and out of the industry forever. The fallout was incredibly swift and absolutely merciless. Within exactly 30 days, Meridian SyncTech officially filed for total bankruptcy. Unable to satisfy the massive debt Vanguard instantly called in, Marcus had all of his personal assets aggressively seized. His luxury estate was foreclosed upon. His expensive cars were repossessed, and his name became a toxic warning story whispered in corporate circles across the entire country. As for me, I finally stepped out of the shadows. I stood quietly by the towering floor-to-ceiling glass window of my new corner office, looking out over the sprawling, beautiful skyline of Chicago. I took a long, satisfying sip of my hot coffee, turned back to my multi-monitor workstation, and began the work of completely redesigning the logistics infrastructure of the United States of America, exactly my way, and entirely on my own terms. Thank you so much to all the wonderful listeners for tuning in and staying with me through this incredible journey. I would love to know where you are listening from today. So please let me know your location in the comments below. If you found today's story satisfying and enjoyable, please consider supporting our work by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon. By joining, you gain immediate access to our absolute best, most exclusive true stories that are simply too intense to publish publicly on YouTube. You can easily become a member by scanning the QR code currently displayed on your screen, or by clicking the direct Patreon link provided in the video description or the pinned comment section. Your support means the world to us. Thank you again. And stay tuned for the next serving of cold, hard justice.